Welcome to episode 4 of Zero Basis Points. You have Haik, Sahakyan, and George Guidotti. George, how's it going?
Good, man. How you doing, man?
Good. Getting a little rest from all the conference stuff after T3, follow-ups. It seems like it never stops, and then, another conference kicks in, which we didn't attend this time, which was Future Proof in Miami, unfortunately. Holding out for Huntington Beach since it's closer and in
Exactly.
our
I was gonna say
backyard.
we'll hit it up in the fall, right?
Yeah, so it'll be awesome. But yeah, just been busy catching up with a lot of stuff. I know one exciting thing about this episode that we've been talking about consistently on the others is our tech stack. So I'm excited to get your feedback and kind of see what you got to show. But yeah, how's everything been? How's the week been?
It's good. It's good. The particular thing that I'm excited about is this episode is like been getting some good feedback on the first couple episodes, which is really just getting started. And one of the things that you and I say about like the podcast or sales or whatever is, you got to get out there and suck. Like you've got to start the process. And I just want to say, one thing about this week is a couple people were asking me like, and I just was thinking about it. How do you start the podcast and how you doing it and all these kind of stuff? And because it's something that was important to you and me, and we talk about AI a lot. And I was going to think about making it a LinkedIn post, and I totally forgot about it until just now. But I was going to share the prompt because it was really just a prompt about what I wanted to accomplish, given the very narrow schedule I have with a full-time job and 3 kids, and then all the stuff I have to do in the house and everything else, and the sports and all that. And you can ask ChatGPT to fit in launching a podcast as a goal within a certain time period, and you have to stick to it. And that's how you get a podcast off the ground. So I did get a couple questions about that, and of course, your help, and you're the man behind the curtain with the team that's making it happen. So but yeah, the week's been good. You and I were laughing. It's starting like my fitness week, and
Yeah.
for I don't know. It's not obvious in the podcast, but you're fit and I'm not. So this week you've been kind of breaking my chop. Well, not this week. Let's say for the last quarter, breaking my chops about getting in better shape. Before the pandemic, I went to the gym at least 5 days a week, even just to get there, look around, get like 20 to 30 minutes on cardio, and then like, weights just to keep it in shape. But completely let go of it after that, nothing. So yeah, this week I'm starting with 4 sets of push-ups, 4 sets of
Pull-ups.
leg raises, um, my best attempt at pull-ups every day,
Hey, it's
and
starting
then
somewhere. Yeah,
100 sit-ups every day. So four
that's
setups,
awesome.
four sets of 25. Um, so I'm starting to feel sore, but haven't worked in any cardio to be honest.
You're gonna
So
be in perfect shape for Huntington Beach. Hopefully, weather's good. We'll start rocking some sleeveless shirts and tees and
yeah,
stuff. And
I'm dad bod. I have dad bod, and so I'm not, in college I used to call it pool body, but yeah, I don't have that anymore. So yeah, I'm pale, and I got work to do.
no, it's awesome. It's a funny thing. Like I always talk about it. Pete brings it up, and with our employees as well. It's like I pride myself in the fitness part of everything, but I always tell folks like you guys should do it as well because it's such a stress reliever, especially having like a very back to back packed week with meetings and things like that. Getting out, throwing some headphones on, running, doing weights, whatever it is. For me, it's obviously just being at the gym. I have like a 5 day routine that I try to hit as best as I can, even with days that I skip in between if I have calls or something backed up. Obviously, priorities go to work, but realistically, it's just about putting numbers up. And it's funny, I have so many people who are just around me who are in that space, and then some folks who are not, and they're just like, "How are you finding time?" And it's like, I'm tired. That's how I'm finding time.
Right.
I don't sleep enough, and that's how I'm finding time. But there's never a perfect time to do it. I think you kind of have to rip the band-aid and do it. And it's a subject that's near and dear to me because my workout journey started when I was like 15. So my dad had open heart surgery. He went to the gym after the procedure to basically, you know, get back to a healthy lifestyle. I ended up being his gym buddy, for
Okay.
a time being. He went back to work obviously after he felt better, but I stuck with it. So through college, through everything, I've kind of just worked out and found that as to be my sanctuary away from work and get in there and do a lot. But given the gyms you go to, it's awesome for networking too, especially in the big cities like Boston, New York, where you're at. A lot of clients, a lot of people who are in that network are also there. So you see them at 5 a.m. They're like, man, this guy's dedicated. Let me see what he does. And then it's like, oh, I work in fintech, I do this. And then suddenly you're making connections. So it's been
Right.
awesome. So yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely highly
I think that
recommend
I
it.
could be wrong on the gym connection between Carson Wealth and Orion, two Omaha-based firms. And that could be like Ron, now Omani, and Eric Clark, like meeting at the gym back in the day. I could be wrong, but I think I remember hearing a story like that. And
Yeah.
to your point of like finding the time, um, my dad once said to me, he gave me something. And I was so busy, man. I'm like, Dad, dude. And he said, if you want something done, give it to the busiest guy in the office. And I think that, like, when we think about, because those are people that have like a process. It's like, oh my God, I put the, and so, I think when you start working out like 3 days in a row, and I'm talking to myself right now because I'm not doing this,
Yeah.
but I know this enough because I've done it over all the years. After 3 days in a row, and I used to be a runner, and you run for that runner's high, and you'll do it no matter what. And even when I was going to the gym, it doesn't matter if it's snowing or icy. And if I was the morning crowd, so I'm like 5:30 a.m. Like if I was there and the sun was up, I'm like a loser. Might as
Yeah.
well just wait for tomorrow. So I loved working out in the morning, but like it's not how do you find the time. It's like once you commit, you can't live without it. So you're gonna make the time. You'll sleep less to get that. So you gotta get up and just well, for me it was about going early, which meant I have to wake up early, which like was because I had kids and I wanted to leave the house before they woke up. And so, that's the only time you're gonna find time is in those really early morning. And also with the kids is being really fit. And when I think about it, because I have a 15-year-old, I got a 9-year-old, and I've got a 4-year-old. I've got to be very fit long term for the 4-year-old. When I think about where he's going to be in 20 years, he's only 24. I don't want to say how old I'm going to be in 20 years. But you've got to be in good shape. It's so good. You're so much happier. Who doesn't have nerves and anxiety like every day? You're happier and you're of better service to your family. That's why I stopped,
Yep.
you know, staying up late, to put a long story short. But like the healthier you are, you're a better service to yourself, which is like the first person you have to take care of, then your family, your clients. These are the people that subscribe to our software, the clients of advisors. You've just got to be on point. We've got to be like stoic in our space. When everybody's panicking or they want to know what to do with their money, they're calling our industry like, for advice. So if you're part of that, I think you should be in tip top shape. And I'm
Yeah.
not.
Hey,
So
at least you strive to be. But no, that's awesome. I think we'll be doing check-ins as the podcast goes, and each episode we might get some more feedback and some
yeah, we
numbers
say at
up
the
there.
Arca booth, you need to bring like the pull up bar or things that kind of demonstrate cardio, endurance, or
I've been
power.
talking about this since the last year's T3. Pete and I were,
Right.
and you were there. We're like, we should bring a bench in here, squat rack, something, and just based on the number of reps you get a discount. But the insurance and liability on that's going to be wild. I don't want to see advisors popping out shoulder, breaking collarbones,
I know.
displacing hips. But
It would be fun at a conference, but on the way to conferences, we hit that airport too. Like, who's going to open up the gym at airports? Like,
I know.
imagine that long layover, something happened, you just hit the gym.
It's like a mini
Um,
Equinox box that you got to put into the airport. Just get in there, shower,
right.
hit the gym, shower, be on your way. You could even rent some of the clothes. I know they do that in Japan too, but
Yeah, it
it's
might even make you
endless.
more inclined for a layover if it's a good deal. You're like, yeah, sure. Denver's got a great
Yeah.
gym, beautiful view, the Rockies. Yeah. So
Yeah, you see
maybe I'll
planes
maybe I'll
taking
fly
off
through
while you're
Denver.
squatting. Why would you not want that?
And we're giving airports ideas. I mean, everybody should be tuning in for this one.
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting jacked and getting stacked, I know we've been talking
Nice
about,
segue. Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna, this is something we've been talking about. Everyone's been pinging me about it, to be honest. So whether it was at the conference, they were like, "Hey, we heard episode 1 and 2," and then Pete Franco always like pings us on the LinkedIn, and he's like, "I can't wait to see this one because you guys are going to share a little bit about what your ideal tech stack is." So you're the
Right.
expert in the space. You talk
Oh
all
boy.
day with some of these folks. Let me throw up something on the screen that you put together for this, and we can go ahead and talk it through. So I'm gonna open it up, and then I'm gonna give you the floor, George.
So I put this slide together, especially coming off the last episode where I was talking about, red tail versus wealth box and blood in the water and all those things. We're having fun, but we're being really real about the word on the street at the same time. Anybody that I'm talking about is a major player in our space. And that's why I'm having a good time talking about them. I'm friends with every one of these companies, but that's not why anybody's on this list. So, um, 20 years in this space, and I came up with three scenarios that would hit a firm anywhere between 50 million and 2 billion in assets under management. After that, firms have a tendency, and this is my opinion, George Guidotti's opinion, no one else's, um, and my intuition, as I've said before, about what tech stacks work. If you think I'm wrong, but I say this is, if I were going to start out a consulting gig, this is what's in the back of my mind, and I start moving in the direction of one of these slides and breaking apart bits and pieces based on the feedback I'm getting, from the firm that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother episode that you and I talked about doing that we almost wanted to blend into this, which is I'm an enterprise and I want to build a headless solution that I am Haik and George RIA aggregator, and we have $100 billion and we want our own everything. Um, that's not going to happen on this episode. That's where we would talk about things like data lakes and, that's such a small portion of the firms. But so here we go. If I were just starting out a firm today, whether I was breaking away from a wirehouse, I would start out with custodian on the first line. Custodian, my custodian choice would be altruist. So I would do my best to get Jason or somebody on the phone with altruist, because really an exceptional passion of making things as easy as you and I expect them to be with apps we use in crypto. And that's only to say that it's very easy to fund accounts and move money around in crypto. So if you open that app, so in the same way, if you are working with altruist, you're getting things that are really easy to use, like billing, client reporting, a model marketplace, and rebalancing. Um, so why not start there if there might be barriers to entry at other firms? Like, why not start there? I would need, obviously I'd have a call with altruist just to break that down and validate it for me. After that, love the idea of nitrogen, which gives me a risk score, a general idea of what the investors I'm working with, how they feel about risk. Even myself, who I think like I am a really risky guy, a very conservative nitrogen risk score. I was like, wow, look at that. So I think it's good because when markets hit the fan, you go to the nitrogen score, and you talk through why we arrived at that. So then from there we have a CRM. It's wealth box. And another thing that I want to note looking at these slides is there's arrows that have purpose, and they represent kind of the flow. They represent the flow of data between the different applications. A vendor could tell me I'm wrong on these, but I'm pretty sure I'm spot on. So custodian data would flow to CRM data, would also flow to nitrogen. Nitrogen might be bidirectional with altruist. That doesn't really matter for right now. Might be really significant if you're using both in model marketplaces and stuff like that. But okay, so then Wealthbox. Wealthbox can do everything that you need a CRM to do if you're an advisor in our space. And it's the most friendly priced, and I will say exposed CRM as far as what are they doing, what features are being released, what's in the pipeline. It's, you just follow them on LinkedIn, and I don't even know if I follow them, but I'm pretty informed of what's happening over at Wealthbox. Um, from a financial planning tool, I picked Money Guide Flow and Right Capital because they're both I feel like simpler to deploy and understand from a goals based planning perspective. And they do a lot for friendly pricing. They consume data from Wealthbox. Those solutions can pass information directly downstream to the next one, Laser App, or I can do that from my CRM. So, Laser App is a form filling solution that has any form that you're filling out in an industry, let's say to open up a new account at Schwab, Fidelity, Pershing, buy insurance, direct investments, anything, any form that you're filling, you can take the data from your CRM, from Wealthbox, populate forms, and send them out for e-signature. And so they go out via DocuSign for e-signature. So if I were, and another reason I picked this, not only because of the workflow and the integration, is because if I were a client on the receiving end of this workflow, and I'm working with an advisor, I know it's a new firm. I know it's not Merrill Lynch, it's George and Haik Investments.
Yeah,
So you still need an easy way to sign documents, check your balances. All of this can be, get a good look at the future possibilities in my financial planning tool. I always say that's kind of like your windshield of investments, and then your performance reporting solutions, your rear view mirror, and you're going to get that through your custodian.
that's
So
awesome.
that's package one.
So speaking of package one, just to pause right there, I mean, I'm completely bullish on Altruist. I think more recently, and I was a part of their office hours recently that they had on
Yeah, I wanted to do that. Yeah, I
online,
did.
which was great. But we talked about certain things around even digital onboarding, right? So they specialize in a lot of these things that we expect out of the box for ease, not only for bringing assets on board, but just operationally, like where you're going to see the easiest path forward. So I think Altruist has been awesome for that. So I definitely agree with that, having it on the simplest case for some of these advisors getting out there. Wealthbox, same thing, right? We recently they just announced that they're doing an AI note taker, which I'm a big fan of for a feature, not a complete product. So kudos to them for kind of identifying that that's something that people are gravitating towards. So why not include it in their CRM? And I think that's going to just be so much more retention for them, for their clients. For the financial planning softwares, I mean, one feedback there is agree with kind of what people are using, what I'm seeing on the ground as well. Unfortunate part of some of these like Money Guide and Right Capital is they're closed off environments for a lot of folks who are trying to integrate data in there. They have the workflow set up, etc. But if you're trying to do something that's a little outside of the scope, like we're looking at a client now doing like some type of insurance commission statement stuff that they want to put into certain places, you're not going to have the best of luck building into them because they're just a little closed from an environment perspective. But I'm glad to hear like Laser App will help from a form filling standpoint. And then obviously DocuSign's a no brainer for getting just docs out in mass, which whether you're doing a conversion, bringing new clients on board, whatever, you're just going to need to be fast between getting the client to agree, getting a document in front of them to sign for an IA. Like you're going to need a way to transfer that over. You're not going to walk it to them or mail it to them or whatever. It's just outdated. And you need some of the, I think one thing that a lot of people are going to look at this and say, yeah, this is great, but like, what's the other non-quantitative benefit of this is you're bringing in a lot of the credibility and reputation of these softwares that you're packaging together and then coming as a firm and using them. It's like saying you're not Merrill Lynch, you're Haik and George Investments. You're going to want some credibility from the softwares you're using that you can support them and do a lot of this stuff. I think where this, you throw a wrench into this workflow is when you start doing some assets like alts and stuff that are not maybe tracked completely at custodians, they're tracked offline, etc. But there's, you start hitting that a little on the mid-sized and larger scale. So we can definitely cover that. But that's awesome for the first simple use case. What about, I know second one you have a couple more names in there for both custodian as well as the CRM, but I'll
Right.
let you take it from there.
You almost gave me a perfect segue. You and I did not rehearse this slide. I added custodians. Now I kept altruist in there, and I would the whole time because as I grew, if I was hitting what I would call a blocker with my custodian and what I wanted to do for my clients, I would reach out to altruist and find out what that blocker was. Maybe I had a client that says, I just don't know who altruist is. If I can convince the client to give me their money, I think I could probably convince them that altruist is a good decision. a lot of advisors. Now I'm speaking as not as an advisor, just somebody who's spoken with, tens of thousands of them. But if I had to go with Schwab, everybody knows who Schwab is. I put Axos on there because Axos is a name that's up and coming. They're owned by I think Axos. I forget who the parent company is. I think it's Axos Financial, but Axos Bank, Axos Advisors, Axos Clearing. So they have everything that I need. Really white glove service, making a move in the RIA space, and building out a platform. Another one of those firms that you just follow them or like are dialed into LinkedIn, you can see what they're building and rolling out some really cool stuff. So added them to the list because I think they would treat me with a white glove service, which I think a lot of advisors get bummed out when they go to a custodian. They're like, they don't care about me. They just got too big. And, that's why advisors like SSG, there were different levels of attention that you would get when you needed something. And then continue. I added red tail because when a firm gets larger, they're going to start talking about red tail and its ability to do double back flips and swan dives over waves and like tunnel under, you know, whatever. Like, so red tail can do things that, as a CRM develop team, like we couldn't do. So they also have what's called the red tail switcher. I don't know exactly what Wealthbox has, but I could have 50 advisors on Wealthbox. They could be calling, their firms other things, but I could link them to my master, if you will, and just switch between different instances of Redtail. And then I added eMoney Advisor down here because to your point on investments that aren't at the specific custodian, eMoney Advisor will give you the ability not only to do what appears to be more sophisticated financial planning, but also aggregate every asset that is not at one of the custodians on the left. So you've got cash edge under the hood and a ton of direct teams at eMoney Advisor. So as you move from left to right and you're thinking, we've got to pick up accounts that aren't now, eMoney Advisor could then possibly feed back to your CRM, might not, but most likely the client portal you're deploying to your clients at this point in your RIA lifecycle is the eMoney portal, which is aggregating all the accounts anyway. So that's where I would put every account that is not at the custodians. And again, end on the same two with form filling and laser app.
It. Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting here, and having been in this market where uh, I was at Adapar deploying a lot of the clients who are falling into this kind of mid-sized layer. Obviously, the benefits of having something like an Adapar, an additional reporting, etc. It's not when you're located at one custodian; it's when you have multiple. Plus, you're doing a lot of this offline stuff. But just to note, and because this applies for the second and the third kind of layers of what we're talking about here, anything that you want to enhance on top of this, like you're able to. There are softwares out there that you can strap into your custodian on top of it, have it feed in with all the accounts, you put in everything offline, and then you say, hey, here's a more consolidated reporting that captures all that. So instead of just the need of going back from eMoney back to CRM and then having a report there, you're literally taking that consolidated report across all of them and pushing stuff out. And that's where I've lived for the last couple of years with Adapar before I left and started kind of with our consulting in Arca. But it's interesting because, yeah, the truth is, for a firm that's starting out, given your size, you can get a lot of what you need out of the gate with a lot of these custodians, with a lot of the CRMs, etc. Now, if you're trying to do more bespoke services, more boutique, you want to get more assets on the books, start charging for your alts and things like that. That's where a lot of the other softwares come in, like the Adapars of the world, the Orions, etc. So I think this is awesome. I think one feedback for the custodians, it's for stuff like Altruist, who is also aiming to grow with the firms. You're completely right. If you have some type of limitation, and you have enough foresight when you're going to hit it, I think firms like that want to partner up, want to build with you, want to grow into the space, right? And it's one where, sure, you may have to run from some things that reputationally Schwab's more known for, et cetera. And you kind of have to pick and choose. But I love that your last layer, which I'll let you get into, has custodian A, B, and C. It starts out with, hey, you could be multi-custodian to do this. And really, one of the biggest themes of our podcast and everything we talk about is that democratization of the data. And I don't mean just for the future episodes of like data lakes and things like that. But you can have clients sitting across all these custodians and then have a consolidated reporting that feeds in all that, as you've shown here. So I'll let you run with that one, George, as well, and then we can
Yeah.
jump into something else.
And to that point, like these are vanilla interpretations of tech stacks. Like we could get wild on, well, I wanted to do this, I wanted to go around that way. And that's where it's like, okay, we're getting into the limitations of certain vendors. We can't get that from vendor A. Vendor B is only willing to get this. We want to put Money Guide's probability of success with Orion's rate of return and the Riskalyze score in one screen. And, it's getting, and I'll talk to people over the years. It's like, well, how do you get the vendors to participate? And it's, you meet them at conferences and you bug them a lot and you beg them to update their technical documentation. So as tech vendors, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make these arrows go everywhere you can. And then when this evolves into, let's say, we're going to start hitting our limitations on this third one, but then we get into, okay, well, now we just need to blow this whole thing up and build a customized solution for a couple of the biggest RAs in the space, or, a large financial institution. So what we're looking at here is a little bit of slide two. Well, they all evolve. We're in a multi-custodian scenario. We're using multiple custodians, George. We cannot go with the custodians client reporting. Okay. And you're going to have to use Orion. You're going to have to use Advison. To your point, Haik, if you were a family office, we're going to be talking about Adapar. And so Adapar could be on here too. But for me, and in my experience, I've worked with family offices, but they're like 5% of the 100% of offices I've worked with. So at this point, these multiple custodians do a good job of feeding Orion and Advison, both of which can handle your reporting fees and rebalancing needs. Regardless, and I put on the next slide, I did a little bit of research. Depending on how you use the tools with nitrogen, Orion and Advison looks like they've got some bidirectional things happening. I don't know like the use cases to talk to them intelligently. So that's why the arrows are going in both directions. If you notice, if you're using Advison, the arrow goes right across the bottom underneath of Redtail because you don't need the data to feed into eMoney Advisor. I believe Advison would feed eMoney. If not, you're going to have Orion or the custodians feeding eMoney anyway, so it doesn't matter. At which point you can get your forms down to Laser App and out for DocuSign. I kept for CRM, Wealthbox and Redtail in there. You could, at this point, say, no, we're a Salesforce shop and put Salesforce in that box. And that's where this goes on to a new page in the slide that doesn't exist of, okay, well, you're going to have to give me requirements. I'm going to have to ask you some questions, and we're going to have to start building out a diagram that's custom for the instance of Salesforce that you're talking about. So, you know, that's kind of the three scenarios. If I'm thinking of a new, mature, and growth mode, well, they're all growth mode, but once you hit the 250, 500 million, you're on the third row.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my summary.
Well,
I'd
no,
love
I
to know
think
what you'd do with them.
yeah, no, this is awesome. I think it's a great starting point for anyone wondering kind of where this sits in. One quick question from, taking everything we've talked about so far. What's your stance on, and this is an age-old question from all the conferences I hear, an all-in-one solution versus a best-in-breed kind of thing that as people talk about putting together? I've been in both fronts and I've had obviously the pros and cons of both of them, but where do you kind of stand where someone comes in with that question and says, look, I'm looking for software that I want to have the best of across the board versus I just want everyone to be uniformed in one place that we centralize it. And the reason I asked that is because, as you mentioned, another slide above this is where you start getting to the custom stuff, and that's where a lot of hidden costs of innovation kick in. But for those firms that are still within these three tranches, when they're looking for best in breed versus all in one solution, what's kind of your take and what have you seen in the past?
I would pick an integrated best of breed over an all in one. I mean, It depends on the size of my organization, I guess. If I really felt like I was losing control and I wanted to create a branded experience, when you get into the 30 billion plus range, perhaps you want to use a solution that will unify the best of breed solutions you have chosen. Otherwise, I don't think there's one platform that does it all. There isn't, you know. Um, and back to the slides before with the custodians, I think that you have people like Jason Wenk and Altruist, and I'm not trying to have an Altruist commercial here, but I had to give a lot of thought without asking any other advisors. I was going to about where I would start, and I'm just like, why wouldn't I start with Jason, with Altruist, and they're going to put as much in one as possible, but to try to be like the best CRM or the best financial planning tool, there's too much opinion in those solutions, and there's so much expertise. So when you think you can build a CRM, first of all, that's the last tool I would tell anybody to build. It's like I tried it, and I did it, and it's really hard. And power users, the thing that they log into every day and they spend their time there, they just figure out how to break it, then they figure out how to work. So it's a tough one. So it keeping up with the requirements of a CRM user base is a specialized need. And so I think that I like firms that focus on, I like Riskalyze, obviously, nitrogen, you know, uh, the different financial planning tools, the different everybody found like the way that they did it right. And what makes the RIA space so dynamic that people outside of the space don't know is there's almost personalities that align with the personalities at the firms that we decide to go with. And it's like back in the day when there was TD Ameritrade Institutional, like everybody they were just kind of, they got cool custodian, and startups and tech people gravitated towards that. Um,
Yeah.
but going back to answer the question, I would start out with the tools that I need until I felt like that process was breaking on me.
Yeah. No, I think that's very, I think, deliberate kind of rollout of the technology, and I think that's smart because what ends up happening is a lot of folks start buying everything they see others doing, but then it ends up not being successful because it just doesn't fit into the requirement that they have or the vision they have for their firm. And so you want to be able to swap out a couple of these things and fix it and say, I want the best in breed across the board. Or are you like, I'm stuck in this all in one, it doesn't work for me, and now I got to look for another one, right? That's where I've seen it kind of head toward. So I think, but that brings up a second question, right? Where the follow up to that is, if you do have the best in breed, you had your arrows for the integration, it's not always as smooth. And that's where there's a lot of gaps within those systems of how do I layer it in? How do I actually take the data that I'm seeing in my custodian, reconcile it, put it into a performance reporting tool, and then layer it in with all this outside data that's coming in, whether it's documents, whether it's manual data entry for alternatives, etc., and then create this deliverable that I want my firm to stand by, right? So
Yeah, that's why I think every vendor that's building software in wealth management or anywhere on the planet, the cool parts of the application that you're building need to have API endpoints that allow it to send and receive metadata and documents from anywhere that's capable of posting that stuff. So if I want that Money Guide Pro probability of success inside of my application and the nitrogen risk score inside of my application, like they have to be available to me. Otherwise, somebody's going to come in and try to disrupt the space to say, look, I'm just going to put them both together. I'm going to build an app with both of them, you know? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, so I think that it's tough when one app has like everything you need to complete the puzzle for like thousands of firms. Like, man, if that app would just give me that, then I wouldn't have to build anything because everybody just wants that. So and there are certain things you'd rather build yourself and compete. But yeah, to your point, like if every software vendor just was open, and you sign an NDA and then you have access to their dev portal, and you can share it and just boom. That's how we drive the industry forward and create like really cool stuff.
Yeah, I
That
think that's, I mean, to your point, that's where a lot of, and I'll go ahead and share something on screen that I think has resonated really well for a lot of folks who we've been talking to from the ARCA side. When you're looking at your enterprise system, you're looking at whatever the best in breed is within your environment and how essentially you can fill in the gaps, leveraging AI, leveraging automation, and a lot of these things, you end up having something like an ecosystem, right? And that's such a played out term that I hate to kind of throw it into the podcast because a lot of people have tried that and hasn't worked. But I think where we are and where the technology is, instead of just leveraging stuff that we're reliant on for the vendors to allow us to access, et cetera, there are ways around those kind of obstacles as well. And that's where ARC has been focused on the last couple of months of how to make this ecosystem really work for clients. So we've had folks at T3 and even prior who were asking, like, I already have my enterprise system, I've built something, or I'm sitting in Invent, mile marker, whatever it is, like that's my enterprise system, that's where I go for everything, but I need to get all this other things in, I need to be able to have AI on top of it. And this is something that we've shown and it's resonated really well, where it's like I can fill in the gaps of your operational inefficiencies by leveraging things like our security master to make sure that it's always one-to-one across, regardless of custodian, regardless of where you're getting your data set. I can use our import engine to reconcile that data day to day, whether it's on the tax lot level, whether it's on the position level, the price, etc., corporate actions. I can go ahead and layer in everything that's coming in from your alternatives where you have employees or maybe offshore resources who are doing the data entry for it to automatically be read, leveraging AI. And all that layers in, then the AI is able to get a full overlay across all your systems and give you all the insights that you care about, all the analytics as well as dashboarding, etc. So here is where I think a lot of the world is trending. Obviously, we're going to leave the how do you make and build something like this from a data lake perspective for another episode, because I think that's its own beast to
that's the work.
devour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, like I said, what I alluded to before, there's a lot of hidden cost to innovation when you want to build it yourself. And a lot of advisors are smart enough to identify it, so they don't want to get into it. But where I don't want people to make the mistake is to price themselves out or to sell themselves short, because it's more possible than they actually think initially for doing something like that, given your size, given your resources. But I think we talked about this many times on episodes. I'm all about democratizing the data. Like
Right.
that's where, and I think that goes back to what you said, George. If you are a firm that is an all-in-one, you're best in breed, regardless, you have to have open APIs because the data that's sitting in there is the client's data, and they need to take that data and do whatever with it at some point, whether it's tying it out across their entire workflow to make it an automation, or own it in a data lake that they want to store in the future. The point is they need access to that data. And I've heard a lot of rumblings internally from clients who are concerned for all these all-in-one solutions trying to tie it down and maybe close up the APIs, etc. And my point is, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot as a product, as a platform by doing that, because one, you've promised these folks the data. Two, when you do close it off, like what else are you going to do next that they're going to be kind of stuck in this, falsified kind of moat around their data where you're keeping them hostage. So I think there's, I'm very passionate about that side of the business because it's been one that I've always fought against. I've
Right.
worked in that ecosystem, but I mean, I think the future is about the data democratization. So I'm all about it on at Arca, but I would hope a lot of other firms take that same stance.
Yeah, like that democratization and independence, like our space is like the spirit of independence.
Yeah.
So, these advisors are very dialed into somebody that's trying to make them captive anywhere. It's like, whoa, whoa. That's like when you're giving demos, like they're usually the question of the backup or who owns the data comes up on the first demo.
Yeah.
So that slide that you had was awesome. It looked like on the top left next to it was external data sources next to
Yeah.
the World Wide Web. Yeah, I guess that's where everything on my slides would come in, the external data sources, right?
Yep.
No. So yeah, that's a powerful slide that you have up. And I like the way that, I like to interpret technical needs with the most simple diagram I can create, because it lets firms look at it and say, no, the data doesn't go that way. And it really has to get down to the point where you're talking about, well, when the phone rings, and really break down like how do things unravel at this firm, and like really where do they break, and you can point to it on a diagram. And I think that that helps firms articulate their requirements, especially when we
100%.
get into the next level of tech stack, which is fun. That one was that's fun too. But when we get into the next level of tech stack, one of the things that's hard to work with the big RIAs is that they have to come up with a lot of their own requirements, and there's a lot of people. Give you one example. Um, if one firm might say that they're creating households in Salesforce, and you talk to the advisors and they say, we create households in Orion, and people say that we identify securities or bonds as this, and another advisor says that we identify them as this, and they call into the office and changes get approved, like things just become a mess. Like the diagrams will help firms identify their requirements, because when you see that, like again, it's when you're talking to the different firms about, oh, this is what you're calling a household, or that's what you're calling a household, that's simple requirements, but they have tons of downstream implications if you're bringing data here before you send it over there, because you just said this system said that's what a household was, and now we're telling that system's what a household was, but everybody else just said the household's over here. um, so getting those business requirements, like those help facilitate those discussions. That's what I
Yeah,
wanted to say.
100%. I'm right now in multiple engagements with some of these enterprise deals, and a lot of what we do is when I first talk to them, right? And it's a very easy ask initially. Can you do X or Y? And we're like, yeah, we
Of
can. Let's
course.
now let's go down that route, right? So we know there's this entire path because, like you said, the more people they involve into the uh, conversation, the more people are going to come up with requirements that relate directly to their job, whether it's a director of operations, director of trading, whether it's client solutions and services. So
Compliance. Yeah,
yeah, so when we go in there, we actually like to put a workflow together for them and send it back to them and say, "Is this what you're talking about?" And a
exactly. This
lot of
is what I
times,
heard. Yeah,
yeah, a lot of times what happens is we'll go further than they even imagine because they look at it from the standpoint of, I just need you to come to this stage and after this I'm good. But we say, well, if we're getting this close, the only thing remaining here is you taking this data and doing something else. You just do it in here. And with the newer agentic AI kind of approach to everything in the development for it, we can go downstream and say, well, we can hit all this stuff and more, and then they come back and say like, oh, we're interested because we didn't even think you can do that part. Well, there a lot I'd rather hear it up front and kind of, as you said, look at that workflow, draw it out, show me where it's breaking for you or you think it's going to break, because there's definitely a solution that I can put in place prior to us going down that route and building this whole thing and then surprising you at the end where it's like, oh, we didn't think halfway through.
right.
So I think that's
No, it's
definitely
a
one of the
lot
ways to do
like
it.
it's a lot like an advisor working with a client, where the clients are like, "Oh my god, I got kids, they've got college, I got money, I need to do this, and I've got a lot of accounts and I got a lot of paperwork," which sounds crazy to you, like dad or mom trying to piece all that together. But an advisor's like, "Give it to me, dude.
Yeah,
Put it
this is
into
what I
some
do.
beautiful thing that returns it to me." I'm like, that makes sense, but a little off over here. I was kind of hoping for a boat. Don't want to send my kid to college. Whatever you want to say, like you can make those adjustments.
Yeah.
But at least you start and say, this is what I heard. They come back, no, that's what I heard. Okay, here's the investment policy statement. Sign it. We're gonna assign you to a model portfolio. And in the same way, we're going to, as tech vendors, you listen, you've got a lot of moving parts. Here's what I heard in the form of a diagram. Tell me if one of the arrows is wrong. It's just better than an email going back and forth anymore. Like, I don't know if it's like because we've gotten into a world where we're scrolling and just expect to be able to like capture an idea really fast, but it takes a long time to make a simple slide, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you start out with a lot of arrows and you're like, ugh. It's like you got to take a walk in the middle of making those slides.
To your point, like we've progressed to the stage, I think that now a lot of the conversations we have, like I pride myself in partnering with the clients and prospective clients that we have. I've always have, regardless if it was while I was working at Adipar, while working at Blackmar or Arca, it's like, give me the problems that you have and I'll come up with a solution. Maybe not like right off the bat, but give me some time. I'm going to come back to you with something and I want you to say, what you think about it. And I think what's happened is a lot of the official, turnaround time for things and the idea share and things like that. People have kept it close because it's like you're telling me stuff I might not be able to do, and I'm gonna try to hold it close because you're my client now. I don't want you to go elsewhere for it. Now it's like just give me the problems, we'll solve it. And I think there's this more open. I don't want to call it open source because that term is mostly for the technical side, but there's a more openness to how we're approaching problems now in the wealth tech space, and I'm hoping that same kind of solution resonates. But to your point, like to keep someone's attention, to get in front of them, to do all this stuff, that's changed so much. I can't tell you how many times, like when I was starting the business of consulting, like I had to have an official, business line to do this stuff with folks and whatever. Now it's like people are just hitting me up on mobile, like, hey, I'm connecting you to someone. It's like, yeah, let's text and let's talk, because that world has, we're catching up from an institutional side to what retail has been doing, to what consumer side has been doing. Now everything is like that too. I text like certain clients and they're like, hey, I need this thing really quick. I'm like, great, shoot it over. And I'm getting introductions to iMessage too now, which I wouldn't have thought was the
Yeah.
case a couple of years ago. So
Well, I think you need to demonstrate that from a selling perspective, and what I think the best sales folks and the best advisors, same way we just talked about an advisor absorbing all of their clients' frustrations. When we absorb, like I might sell tools that take care of 20% of your day, but like I need to hear your whole story. I'm an open source salesman. And so like take advantage. Like I'm going to ask you which custodian you work with, performance, billing, planning, CRM, form filling, e-sig. How are you getting clients' attention? So if I know the whole story, like I can identify overlap, the exact same thing. Your story is like your portfolio. You're telling a story. I'm gonna turn it around in a diagram that's a portfolio of your ecosystem and make recommendations. To that point, ecosystem, as played out as it is, man, you can't get away from the work. And because if like I look at an ecosystem and you think of like an island, with an ocean and clouds and fish and a coral reef, and that's how I like to think of it. But it's the ecosystems that we're using in wealth management. The data's the water. It's evaporating. It's moving around. It's returning. There are needs, otherwise the ecosystem dies. The sunlight is the
100%.
supervision. It's the curation. So there's so many parallels between it. And I thought, what did I say? I was texting you about it. I wanted to call it something other than ecosystem. Oh no, it wasn't component. I forget.
No, it wasn't. It was like not environment, was it?
No, yeah, it started with C. Um, I can't remember what it was, but whatever it was a component of an ecosystem. You can't get away from ecosystem. Your firm is an ecosystem of people. Your technology is an ecosystem of vendors. So they are ecosystems. So I think we'll see what we talk about on the next podcast. But the ecosystem and the headless systems where it gets really choppy will be a good episode. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I think to your point that you can't get away from it and it's all connected. A lot of the data is what's shared. A great example of that is like when I have folks who are touching so much data, they're like, hey, nothing is really tying out to what I started it with because I have X, Y, and Z, like same investment named 50 different ways because someone was processing the alternatives here and then someone else did the capital calls. They didn't see the position, they renamed it, etc. And to your point, in the ecosystem, the water is your data or whatever you want to kind of call it and how it gets recycled. But realistically, it always comes back. You can't get away from it, right? So the cleaner the water is, the more drinkable it is in your ecosystem, your island. It makes it, essentially go through and it's easier. So I think those are the types of stuff that a lot of folks don't think about. So I mean, that's a great theme and subject for the next podcast, which is like the hidden cost of innovation for doing something like this, because I can't tell you how many times everyone comes up and says like, yeah, I want to go down that route. Well, do you have the technical resources to be able to do something like that? Because it's not just about buying software anymore and just like latching it on. You got to have this thematic approach to, hey, this is what here's our vision of what we want to really do, and this is the data we want to own, and here's what's going to go into it. And that's where a lot of times we help, right? You've been in those conversations, whether it's directly related to the software you're working on with them or not. You help them kind of have these ideas and brainstorm around what to do next. And that's where, I think a lot of the partnership and networking and value has been brought up. But realistically, you think about it and say, hey, this is, if you're going to capture CRM data, great. This is what it's going to look like. This is how you layer it into the ownership data and building these structures of multi-generational pass downs. We're getting stuff from Trust now too, processing it through Core Script, which has been awesome. That's been something that came through from T3. A
Yeah,
lot of
core
folks were
script is
interested in.
incredible.
Yeah. So things like that are nuts, but you don't think about those problems until you look at that wider ecosystem image. You're looking at it from a satellite, maybe, or whatever you said. So, it's some of these cooler things that I think are coming into fruition of our software and our industry. So I'm definitely a big proponent of it. We want to be ahead of it, because I think that's where AI really supercharges what you can do.
Yeah,
And you don't
you're
have to
ahead of
be,
it. One thing
yeah.
I'll say, when you mentioned, like, do you have the resources to do it? I considered it, but I didn't mention, like, when I had my 3 lines, the first one requires very few of your own internal resources. Really, resources escalate when arrows start crossing. You know, because the more arrows that are coming out of one source, the more likely things are going to break. So that's why it's so important to position the tech stack and the client portal that nobody's logging into, just to make sure that everything's landing exactly where you want it to land. I'll always make a joke about client portals, but I sold one for a long time. I built one, but the reality is nobody's using them. I mean, do you use one?
I
Exactly.
anytime that was like the least pressing thing. A lot of from the advisor side, because they think that's their resume, right? They're gonna put that on, and someone's gonna log in and say, "What the heck is going on here?" etc. And I want to see the logo up there of the guy I'm paying. But
Yeah, I know.
realistically, the clients don't care. You could text them that information. I'm not saying to do that, SEC violation, but you could text them the information in one way, and they'll be happy to get it. I just want to get down to the information. I don't really care what it looks like.
Yeah,
So
and a client portal that's aggregating data, and like you turn a little bit into support as opposed to doing your best to send somebody right to the custodian, or you've decided to make the client portal a massive, as expensive as your portfolio reporting system. It's to make it that perfect and polished. That's why eMoney was the portal that I had in my second slide. Just use the eMoney portal. I think that even persisted to the third slide. Can't remember off the top of my head.
yeah,
But so yeah, client portals are an interesting one. For all the time we spend on our phone, like if it like people go, I want to see that client portal. And like the reality is like, what client portal are you logging into? Like you kind of want to be like the other apps your clients are using, or I don't know. It just was always a big one, but
yeah. No, I
I don't know
agree.
why nobody ever used it.
I agree. I think I mean I think with what we've done from the tech stack side of it, George, I think you put some awesome stuff out there today for the podcast. A lot of food for thought for folks who are looking at tech, and then obviously where we're going. So I think that might be something for the next episode where we actually say, how do you supercharge this thing? And if you're that firm where off the shelf doesn't cut it for you anymore, what do you do next, right? Well, what's kind of the next pathways for you for success? And that's going to be a very interesting one, because that's maybe a tad bit controversial based on where you are and who you bring into the mix. But realistically, it's about giving people what they want, democratizing the data at the end of the day, and then saying, here you go, here's your asset. Now run the business around this. And you're always going to have growing pains around it when you own that growing pain internally. So I think where
I
from
always
there
said
we
building software, and like it was way back in like the Grendel days. We had 3 pillars that like ended every argument. Is it going to make the advisor's life easier? Is it going to protect the advisor? And is it going to grow the practice? And if it didn't do any of those things, it was a waste of our time. Just get it out of here.
exactly
So those are things that when I spend time with an advisor, that's always on my mind, is that those things are constantly being considered, because you can lose value. You lose value wasting time, obviously. So, yeah.
agree. So especially with limited resources, that's what you got to be a little more pointed. So Awesome. George,
Oh
thanks
yeah, and
again
one
for
thing
the
I
time.
wanted to say
Yeah,
is
go ahead.
is if there is a tech stack, to our millions of listeners, if there's a tech stack that you have and you want us to build it, it would be interesting to see what you have and really your most complicated solution. You can follow Basis Points on X and LinkedIn and ask any questions and we'll see them and we'll include them. So yeah, appreciate like the support we've been getting so far has been awesome. So
Yeah, and wherever, as you said from the first episode, we'd love to hear where we're wrong. So ping us, tell us. We'd love to cover a lot of that too. And if you have any thoughts around using the software that George kind of outlaid for the tech stack, or just thoughts around how things might break, we'd love to hear it.
yeah, reach out. We're like your traffic coordinators. We'll tell you where to go. We'll take care of you.
Just do the
So
airplane traffic. Just awesome, awesome. Thanks so much for the time, George. I think we have a lot for the next episode and a lot of content to cover because we're getting into the meat of some of the stuff in our industry that's the biggest problem. So I appreciate the time, and I look forward to the next one.
all right, man. Thank you.
We'll talk soon.